Okay, we are almost done. Hold on, let me just make sure. Okay. Let's running away from home. 3 days had passed since I ended up bedridden when Tuli came rushing into the bedroom. Oh no, mine. Let's ran away from home and he's not coming back. I shot up so fast that I fell forward. What do you mean, Tuli? What happened? Is he okay? I rapidly asked a barrage of questions with my face planted firmly against my bed. Tuli winced a little, probably regretting her decision to tell me. She stroked my hair with a worried frown. Sorry, mine. I should have waited to tell you until your fever went down. But don't push yourself. Your fever will flare back up. Tell me, Tuli. I clasped Tuli's hand and repeatedly begged her to tell me until eventually she let out a defeated sigh. Lay back down, mine. I'll go get Ralph, okay? I nodded and Tuli left the room with a turn. Then I heard her footsteps fade away as she went outside and locked the front door behind her. I strained my ears, waiting for her to come back with my face still planted against the bed. After a lengthy period of anxiously waiting for Tuli's return, I heard returning footsteps, and then the front door began being unlocked and opened. Ralph, what happened to Lutz? When Ralph came inside with Tuli and saw me bedridden with the fever, he sighed. I thought for sure he was camping out here. Didn't I just tell you? Mine's been in bed for 3 days already. No way could she know that Lutz ran away from home yesterday, said Tuli with an angry pout. Ralph apologized for doubting her and turned back to me. Yesterday, Lutz started yelling at Dad the second he got home. He was all like, "Why are you getting in my way? And I've put up with you for this long, but not anymore. I'm out of here." Then he dashed out looking crazy mad. Ralph's explanation was all it took for me to realize what happened. Benno had definitely told him why he couldn't bring him to the other city. That was a relief, I could guess, then that Benno was looking after Lutz. He wouldn't be able to adopt him immediately, but he probably would treat him more or less like a son nonetheless. Mom's losing it, but Dad said not to bother since he'll probably come back soon. I thought he'd be back when he got hungry, but he didn't come back for breakfast or lunch. I'm getting worried. Do you know where he is, mine? Asked Ralph, which made me feel uneasy. If Benno was looking over him, then he should be at work. How could they not know where he was? You don't know where he is? Did he not go to work? Well, we don't know where he works, so... Ralph avoided looking at me as he spoke. For a second, I couldn't comprehend what I had heard. About 2.5 months had passed since our baptism, but Lutz had been going to the Gilberta Company since long before becoming an apprentice, almost a full year by now. How do you not know? It's the Gilberta Company, remember? We know the name because he went to Sieg's workshop a while back, but not even Sieg knows where that store is. Are you saying you wouldn't even know that if Lutz and I hadn't gone to Sieg's workshop? I asked hesitantly, but Ralph just awkwardly looked away without answering. That ticked Tuli off. I can't believe you. Ralph, you don't even know where your little brother works? Don't you talk about work at home? Brothers probably didn't talk as much as sisters did, but still, not talking to Lutz about work at all was just kind of mean. I wasn't sure if they just didn't care, or if they were stubbornly avoiding the subject in protest, but still, knowing so little they couldn't even find him after he ran away from home was really a problem. I reached out and tightly squeezed Ralph's shirt. Ralph, it might not be a bad place to say this, but please talk to Lutz more. Lutz is the one who won't talk, and really I'm the victim here. Lutz got the job he wanted even though everyone else was against it, and now he just does whatever he wants on his days off without even going to the forest. What's his problem? He's got it easy. Ralph swatted my hand off with his eyes wide in anger. Hey, Ralph, don't be rough with mine. She's still sick. Sorry. Shouting down doesn't really help me either, I thought while preparing to back up Lutz. I was aware of how much time I was taking from him after all. But Lutz is working on his days off too. Don't you know that when Benno calls for him or I march him around, he gets paid? He's not playing around or anything. Ralph's eyes widened, then he slowly shook his head. I didn't know about that. There was some misunderstanding since they barely talked, but ultimately Ralph was worried about Lutz. There was no mistaking that, and it really wasn't my place to get involved here. Ralph needed to talk to Lutz, not me. I looked up at Tuli, though through visiting Karina and going clothes shopping with me, she had met Benno and several other employees of the Gilberta Company before. It would probably be better if Ralph went there with her rather than barging in by himself. Tuli, would you take Ralph to the Gilberta Company for me? You don't have to drag Lutz home if he's doing okay, but please check and make sure that he's safe. Definitely. I'm worried about Lutz too. Let's go, Ralph. Tuli took Ralph's hand and started to leave the room. When he glanced back at me with a worried look in his eyes, all I could do was give a weak smile. Ralph had always been a caring brother deep inside, and despite thinking Lutz was just playing around, he was still worried for him. Deep down, neither he nor Lutz were in the wrong here, but their relationship was in tatters. I shut my eyes thinking that it would be nice if when Ralph found Lutz, they would have a decent conversation for the first time in a while. That's kind of getting your hopes a little too high on this. The sun was setting by the time I woke up, or to be more precise, I was awakened by the light streaming from the window hitting my eyes. Thule had gotten home already, judging by the sounds of someone preparing dinner in the kitchen. I drank some water from the nearby wooden cup to wet my throat, making just enough noise for Thule to notice I was awake, and stick her head through the doorway. "You're awake, mine? Think you'll be able to eat?" I sat up with a nod, and Thule brought me a bowl of bread soup. While I ate, she told me what had happened at the store. Lutz was at the store and doing his job like normal. He seemed fine. Okay, that's a relief. I felt immensely glad that we knew where he was, and the worst-case scenario of him getting lost and wrapped up in something had been avoided. Ralph tried to drag Lutz home after seeing him, but Lutz told him not to get in the way of his job. That made Ralph really mad, and after a shouting match, he just stormed off, yelling at Lutz that he could do whatever he wanted to. And then, his dad is saying not to bother with him since he's at his job. Well, yeah, hello! Even his dad knows not to bother his son while he's at work, even if he did run away. At least they know where he is, and he's safe. It felt as if Thule had just explained to me the exact moment that Lutz's family had been damaged permanently beyond repair. I felt my heart clench. You know you're worried about him, but don't go check on him until you're feeling better, okay? Okay. The next day, Gil came to get me instead of Lutz. Apparently, Lutz had asked him to walk me to the temple instead of him for a while, though I couldn't go with him anymore since I was still too sick to go to the temple. Gil peered at me with worry as I remained in bed. "Sister mine, your fever still hasn't gone down?" I need to be careful for a day, even if it goes down, so would you come again in 3 days from now?" Gil knelt by the back of the bed, took my hand, and brought his face close to it as if... what the fuck? As if preparing to kiss it, but instead he pressed his forehead against it and fluently chanted a prayer. "May Sister mine have the divine protection of Hellschmears, the goddess of healing." It'll take more than that to get rid of the devouring. "Thank you. May you too be blessed by the gods." Gil left reluctantly and returned 3 days later as he'd promised. My fever was gone and my parents said I could go, so I went to the temple with him. It felt weird leaving without Lutz, and I couldn't shake an uneasy feeling. After climbing down the stairs and leaving the building, I saw Lutz's mom, Carla, doing laundry by the well. I rushed over to her. "Mrs. Carla, is Lutz back yet?" She shook her head silently. There was no trace of her normal energy or friendly, overbearing attitude. She just looked tired to the bone. "Mine, do you know how Lutz is doing? I heard a little from Ralph and Thule, but that's it since I've been sick with a fever for days. I was thinking about going to the store today and checking up on him." "Okay, could you tell me if he's doing okay?" I agreed, despite thinking she should just go see him herself, and left the plaza with Gil. "Gil, we're going to stop at the store, okay? I want to see Lutz." "If that's what you want, Sister mine, sure, but I don't know why that lady's so worried. Kids don't need parents to survive. Nobody at the orphanage has parents, so yeah." "True. But still, some of those kids were dying the first time I saw them, but I didn't mention that. If the orphans didn't have the mindset those kids don't need parents to survive, they would probably fall apart." Mark welcomed us with a smile when he arrived at the Gilberta Company. Lutz was behind him, writing something on his diptych. "Good morning, mine. Feeling better?" "Good morning, Mr. Mark. My fever's finally gone down, but that's not important right now. I want to talk about Lutz. Please save that conversation for the office. The employees are a bit on edge due to Lutz's family causing stirs these past few days." Mark interrupted me with a gentle smile. It seemed that Ralph wasn't the only one who had come to the store and tried dragging Lutz home. Disheveled poor people coming to a fancy store for nobles and causing a commotion each day was hardly good for its image. At this rate, Lutz's position in the store would get worse by the day. I shut my mouth and nodded. "Master Benno, mine wishes to talk, so I have brought her here." "I don't remember making my office a counseling room." "I am aware." Mark was smiling but exuding an aura that made it clear that he wouldn't take no for an answer. Benno caved in with a nod and a sigh. "I'm sorry, Mr. Benno. We could talk outside if you want." "Nah, here is fine. Last night, Lutz's mom came all the way to my place on the second floor to demand I give Lutz back, shouting about me being a kidnapper and all that. Mark flipped out and sent her packing." Wow. Mark flipping out. That's kind of a sight I kind of want to see, just to see what he's like. It sounds scary. "My apologies, Master Benno." I shuddered at the thought of Carla shouting with all her size and energy. Then I trembled in genuine fear at the description of Mark having flipped out. What had he said to send Carla packing? Maybe she had looked exhausted and dead inside due to Mark's anger? I got the feeling it would be for the best if I never knew what he had said, and so I turned to Lutz. "How are things for you right now, Lutz? Are you living with Mr. Benno?" "What do you mean? I'm living in the attic room where all my stuff is." "I didn't even know Mom came until this morning." Mark had apparently sent her off before she even got to see Lutz. That's why she had asked me to tell her how he was doing. Honestly, that made me feel kind of bad. Wait, the attic room? Yeah, it's all I got. Where else would I go? Lutz said he was living in the attic room, which put him on the same level as a live-in apprentice. In other words, despite having said he would adopt Lutz, Benno wasn't helping him at all. "What's the meaning of this, Mr. Benno? Weren't you going to adopt Lutz?" "Master Benno adopting me? Huh? Where'd that coming from?" "Oh my god, Benno, you haven't told him yet." And I don't know when he was planning on telling him. Judging by how Lutz's confusion, Benno hadn't told him anything. I glared up at Benno, and he too glared back down at me with angry eyes. You idiot, he thundered. Do you think I could just up and adopt him without his parents' permission? No! This is the path Lutz chose, and he's walking it. How many times have I told you to think before you speak? Now you've told him about the adoption at a time when his parents won't give their permission. Oh no. You idiot! I put a hand over my mouth, but it was too late. Lutz's eyes were brimming with darkness. He had likely been living a harsh, lonely life ever since running away from home. His eyes were normally full of optimistic positivity, but now that he had found a target to unleash his frustration on, he looked grim. Mine, did you know all about this? I told her I needed information on your home life and family situation. Master Benno. Benno's revelation made Lutz's eyes waver. He looked at me like a lost kid trying to find his place in the world. But, if you knew, why didn't you tell me? Because I knew you would run away from home. I knew you would turn your back on your family. I care a lot about my family, and I don't want to do something that would destroy yours. I didn't want to harm his relationship with his family, but even so, if Benno could give him a home where he was welcome, if he would adopt him, then I thought Lutz should do what he thought was best. With Benno's help, he wouldn't have to suffer the hell of being a living apprentice until reaching adulthood and gaining freedom from his parents' interference. But in reality, Lutz ran away from home, couldn't get adopted due to the need for parental permission, and was ultimately living in the attic like a normal living apprentice. Only 5 days had passed, and yet the darkness in Lutz's eyes showed just how hard it was for a kid to live alone. Are you saying I was wrong, Mine? I was wrong to run away from home? According to Thule, Ralph had said, quit being selfish and come home. Stop thinking about yourself all the time. You're the one causing problems for the store. Aren't you satisfied already? And so on. If Lutz apologized and went home, he'd be going right back to the same situation he was in before. His family would say that they were right, that he couldn't survive as a living slave. They would say he was selfish after all. He'd probably end up living life while bottling up the frustration he had, thinking that was his only choice. But I didn't want to see Lutz like that, so I rejected the idea immediately. I don't think you're in the wrong, Lutz. How could I, when I know just how hard that you've been working? When I know how much frustration you've been bottling up inside? Whew. Lutz let out a relieved sigh. I peered into his jade-green eyes and took his hand. No matter what happens, Lutz, I'm on your side. I'm still here right now because you said you accepted me as I was back then. In the past, I had also felt like I was alone with no allies, to the point of retreating into my shell. I felt uneasy every day, feeling I had no place in the world, and was ultimately saved by Lutz saying he was fine with me being mine. I wanted Lutz to feel even a fraction of the relief I felt that day. I'll say the same thing you said to me, Lutz. You're fine the way you are. I support you through everything. Just like you saved me, I'll do everything I can to save you. So know that you can always rely on me when things get bad. With tears forming in his eyes, Lutz hugged me with a trembling smile. I don't think there's anyone less reliable than you, Mine. You'd probably crumble the second I tried leaning on you, said Lutz tearfully, while indeed nearly crushing me with his hug. I pouted with embarrassment a bit and patted his back. I'll be able to help a little. Like, how should I give you lunch at the temple? Or how about I give you lunch at the temple? You can't cook food in the attic since you don't have a kitchen, right? That's just eating together. You're not making it. I heard Lutz sniff beside me while rubbing his nose, but still his voice sounded a lot brighter than it was a second ago. I smiled. Shouldn't you be saying I owe you my greatest thanks, Sister Mine, right now? Lutz cackled and lifted his head up, now wearing a smile, his normal optimistic smile. Maybe I'd helped him a little after all. Hey, you two done yet? Benno called out to us with an incredibly exasperated, annoyed expression, his head resting against his chin in a classic bored posture. I tilted my head while still patting Lutz's back. I mean, we can be. Why? Get back to work already. You're distracting me. Benno shooed us away, and Lutz hurriedly separated from me before leaving the room. I figured I would leave too after a quick goodbye, but Benno eyed the door Lutz just left through and continued to speak. Mine. I sympathize with wanting to improve Lutz's situation as soon as possible, but given how his mom was acting yesterday, the adoption talk will have to wait until things have cooled down. Benno's calm assessment of the situation made me feel like I was swallowing a bitter pill. It looks like he's going to be living like this for a while, and things might be fine for now, but a bad living situation bursts the spirit. I can't do anything right now, since it'll impact the store's reputation if his family keeps shouting about kidnapping and being tricked. If you're on Lutz's side, do what you can to help. Right. I thought that even if Lutz ran away, Benno would adopt him and he could focus on work. I thought that he would be able to go to other cities to help make plant paper workshops and finally achieve his dream. I never thought he would become a living apprentice and suffer more than he already was. Just as Benno said, Lutz's spirit would be worn down if he kept up this harsh lifestyle. He would beat himself up wondering if he had done the wrong thing, and ultimately he might end up hating his family. Surely there was something I could do for him, just like how he had supported me, but nothing came to mind and I let a heavy sigh. Okay. How much more? Ooh, less than 50. We got 55 pages left. The High Priest's letter of invitation. What could I do about Lutz? It seemed like the best thing would be for Lutz and his family to sit down, face each other head on, and say what they had to say until everyone could forgive each other. Lutz and his family had ended up so distant from each other because they kept their feelings inside for so long. Especially his dad. Mine, are you listening to me? I came back to my senses from my shoulders being shaken, and I looked at the High Priest in confusion. He looked down at me while rubbing his temples and pointing a finger at my stone slate. You're not making any progress. Oh, I'm sorry. I apologized and got back to doing math. Once I finished a chunk of calculations, I let out another sigh. Maybe I was only so invested in fixing this because I was blessed with a good family. Who could say if it would be better for Lutz to stay separated from his family if they were making him so unhappy? It was hard to say. What path would lead to Lutz's happiness? Mine, you've stopped again. Huh? Oh, I finished this part. They began work on this. The most immediate solution was Benno adopting Lutz. That would give him a strong ally and let him focus on work, and he'd provide him with a good living situation. But Benno couldn't adopt Lutz without parental permission, and he had already said that his hands were tied here. I considered inviting Benno, Lutz, and Lutz's parents to one big meeting, but I doubted they would all get together to talk, and if the conversation heated up so much that Benno or Lutz's dad lost control of the situation, who knew what would happen? I just couldn't see it ending well. I really am useless, aren't I? You certainly are. For once you are entirely correct. I looked up surprised that my murmurs had been responded to and saw that the High Priest was looking down at me with a scary look in his eyes. He jutted his chin toward the bed. Follow me. High Priest, what about your work? Fixing the calculator comes first. It's not very nice to call people calculators. Well, you are his calculator. You're the one doing the math without the calculator. I complained silently while following the High Priest into the lecture room. It was as messy as ever, so I moved some stuff off of the bench to secure a place to sit. The High Priest brought his chair over again and sat down heavily, glaring at me with frustration. He always got a bit more emotional in here, as evidenced by how his glare was twice as sharp as before. What in the world are you thinking about? You have been letting out depressing sighs this entire morning. I'm sorry, it's not related to you or our work or anything. I'll try to focus on work more. If I told him I was too worried about Lutz to focus, the lecture would last even longer. I therefore tried to end the lecture as soon as possible while showing that I was sorry, but the High Priest just rested his head in his fist and eyed me with annoyance. As it is interfering with our work, it is not irrelevant. Can't argue with that. I averted my gaze from his narrow golden eyes. If speaking meant being called a thoughtless idiot, it was better not to say anything at all. I kept my silence, and eventually the High Priest stood up with a sigh, walked up to me, and pinched my cheek. How do you expect me to do my work when there is a depressed child beside me? I hadn't noticed since he treated me like a walking calculator, but apparently he was, in fact, worried about me. I looked up at the High Priest, who was as aloof and hard to understand as ever, when suddenly it struck me. He had been raised as a noble. I knew that due to a political purge, the number of nobles had decreased dramatically, leading to those in the temple being adopted and married away. That probably meant the High Priest knew a lot about adoptions. High Priest, do you know if there's a way for someone to get adopted without parental permission? I asked, causing the High Priest to raise an eyebrow in surprise. What, you've chosen to leave the family you care so much about? Sheesh, I'm not talking about me, duh. His unexpected misinterpretation surprised me so much that I dropped my noble dialect entirely. I slapped a hand over my mouth, but the High Priest just murmured, naturally. Without a word about it, he adjusted his place on his seat, put his arm on each armrest, and linked his fingers in front of his stomach. Then who? There are some methods for that, depending on the situation. There are? I stood up in surprise, and the High Priest nodded while gesturing at me to sit back down. My position here gives me a degree of authority, which can be used to bend the rules, though I will not do so for just anyone. It is about Benno adopting Lutz. There was now a glimmer of hope for improving Lutz's living situation. I sat up straight and looked at the High Priest with hopeful eyes. Those are both very important people to you, I believe. Tell me more. I gave the High Priest a summary of events, answering question after detailed question until he was satisfied. He closed his eyes to organize his thoughts and slowly opened them. Lutz's family opposed his employment as an apprentice merchant and refused to allow him to leave the city, which ultimately led to him running away from home. Benno hopes to adopt Lutz given his bright future, but his parents refuse even that. Your hope is to improve his living situation with your ideal solution, including a resolution to the conflict with his family. You believe the fastest solution will be to have Benno adopt him. If anything is correct so far? Yes. The fact that he remembered all that without taking notes showed just how good his memory was. My awe for his memory distracted me, but the High Priest kept going. Lutz's father said not bother with Lutz since he was going to work. Yes, he didn't say that Lutz couldn't come back. I don't think he did, at least, but this is all hearsay from Thule. I can't say anything for sure. The most unfortunate part about explaining the situation to the High Priest was that I only had second-hand exposure to the thoughts of his parents. I had talked to Lutz and heard Benno's thoughts, but I only knew his parents' opinion from Lutz, Ralph, and Thule. I hadn't spoken to them myself. It would be somewhat tenuous, but if Lutz is taken into the orphanage as an abandoned child, the director of the orphanage could give permission in the place of his parents, enabling Benno to adopt him if he applied to the orphanage. What? And I'm the director of the orphanage. Let's go ahead and send Lutz to the orphanage. Wow, I'm amazing. I'm glad I decided to be the orphanage director. I stood up with pure excitement, but once again, the High Priest gestured at me to sit down. It's not that easy. Contain yourself, Mine. You need to learn to listen until the other party is finished. Perhaps you failed so often because you jump to conclusions and do not let others finish speaking. His extremely accurate and reasonable assertion forced me to sit down without any room for argument. Somehow I feel like the High Priest is starting to understand me better than I do. Although you have been given the position of orphanage director, you are still a minor. Your signature alone would not be sufficient to approve an adoption. In that case, what happens if someone actually does come to adopt an orphan? I'm the orphanage director, but not even my signature is useful. I slumped my shoulder sadly, but in the corner of my mind I knew it would be unreasonable for a kid reliant on their parents to bear that much responsibility. As your signature will not suffice, the duty will fall on me, your superior. High Priest, please, sign the papers for Lutz's adoption. The High Priest let out a deliberate sigh. I do not mind providing the signature, but you spoke entirely from the perspective of Lutz, a child. I will not decide that a child has been abandoned from his word alone. In order to bring him to the orphanage as an abandoned child, I will need to talk to his parents. What? But how? He made it sound so simple, but I wasn't sure how he intended to talk to Lutz's parents. I tilted my head in confusion and looked at me with utter disbelief. What do you mean, how? If you wish to talk to someone, you need merely summon them. What is there to be confused about? I forgot just how powerful authority is. If you wanted to talk to someone, just summon them to you. That was common sense in the temple. I slumped my shoulders, remembering how my parents had been summoned to the temple themselves. Why had I even bothered worried about securing a place to talk? I will grasp the situation in full, and if I find your position agreeable, I will assist in Lutz's adoption. I thank you ever so much. I looked up, feeling enormously relieved. The High Priest was giving a rare smile. Yet it wasn't a chivalrous smile, but instead the grin of someone who had thought up something devious. To that end, you will need to do paperwork in the afternoon as well. No bookworm for you today. Huh? As I froze in shock, the High Priest curved his lips into an even more amused grin. I heard from Fran. This will be more effective than the repentance chamber. No! Fran, you big meanie. Oh yeah, that's a better punishment for her. No bookworm for her. After I tearfully worked through the afternoon, the High Priest gave me the letters of summons as promised. One for Benno, one for Lutz, and one for his parents. Please deliver these. I took the wooden boards with a broad smile, knowing that they would help Lutz's living situation, if only a little bit. Since Lutz couldn't come get me anymore, I left the temple with Fran. If I handed the letters of invitation over with Gil, it would look like we were children playing around instead of an actual summons. Lutz's parents would probably take it seriously with an adult like Fran by my side. I suggest we deliver the letters to Master Benno and Lutz first. At Fran's suggestion, we stopped by the Gilberta Company on the way home. Mark guided us to Benno's office and called Lutz for us. Mr. Benno, who's the best? I'm the best, 'cause check it out. I ran up to Benno with a spring into my step and took out his letter of invitation with a flourish. Benno suspiciously took the board, ran his eyes over it, and then immediately thundered at me with a furious expression. A letter of invitation from the High Priest. What did you screw up this time? I talked to him about Lutz running away to see if he could arrange an adoption, and here we are. Why are you so mad? My thoughts were that I had done something extremely helpful, so Benno's sudden thundering just left me confused and blinking rapidly. What have you done? What? Did I do something wrong? Don't involve nobles in problems like this. You could get us all killed or worse. Benno was furious, but I really didn't understand why. The High Priest was certainly a noble, but he was a reasonable person, and despite his aloofness, making it hard to understand, he did all this out of worry for me. But the High Priest said he needed to do this to repair his calculator, not to mention that I wanted to help Lutz out however I could. I appreciate the thought, Mine, but come on, getting a letter invitation like this is just scary. Lutz hung his head as he looked at the letter of invitation I handed him. Benno likewise was cradling his head with his letter of invitation still in hand. You try to help Lutz, and the next thing we know, the High Priest is sending out letters of invitation. Huh. Don't blame me. You said you couldn't help Mr. Benno, so I just asked another adult for advice. I pouted my lips unhappily, and Benno glared at me, his dark red eyes gleaming with a monstrous light. All right. If I had used all my power to threaten Lutz's family and blackmail them into approving the adoption, this wouldn't have happened. My mistake. What are you talking about? That's terrifying. Mine, if Master Benno wanted to, that wouldn't be a problem for him at all. My family's been damaging his store's reputation, and you shouldn't even need to think about whether he's stronger than my parents or not. Lutz's words snapped me back to reality. By this point, I was just casually visiting the Gilberta Company, but truly felt nervous about going to the North at all. There was a distinct difference in power and authority between the North and South. Carla coming here directly for Lutz had been a real act of immense courage, and Lutz's family not being punished for the problems they had been causing was simply because Benno had mercifully forgiven them. I was trying to resolve this peacefully for Lutz's sake, and yet here you go. The High Priest will be peaceful too. He's even thought of a way to make the adoption work out. Say what? Benno and Lutz both looked at me simultaneously. I explained to them what the High Priest had told me. If Lutz seeks refuge in the orphanage under the claim that his parents have abandoned him, then we'll only need your signature and the orphanage's approval for you to adopt him, Mr. Benno, and that's where you come in as the orphanage director. Benno looked at him with a grin. I hated to disappoint him, but my signature was meaningless. I'm still a child, so it will be the High Priest providing his signature, but first he wants to talk to you and Lutz's parents to understand the situation in full, hence the letters. Benno looked at the letter in his hand while stroking his chin, looking conflicted. You know, seems like the High Priest is really taking a liking to you, huh? Most nobles wouldn't bother to deal with us commoners. Apparently a very valuable calculator. His work efficiency changes dramatically based on how well I'm functioning. Now that you mention it, Otto said something like that too. I might need to thank you for this, but I don't really want to. Why do I feel so exhausted? Benno let out a tired sigh and scratched his head. You should go give Lutz's parents theirs. Sorry, mine. It's okay, I was going to tell Carla about this anyway, but remember, since this is all based on you being abandoned and coming to the orphanage, be sure to come to the temple tomorrow. I waved Lutz goodbye and left the store, beginning my walk home with Fran. I planned to go straight to Lutz's place, but found Carla walking around aimlessly by the well. Mrs. Carla! I called out, and Carla's head shot up. She came running this way immediately. Her once round face had thinned with exhaustion, and I could see dark circles beneath her eyes. Took you a while, mine. Did you see Lutz? How was he? He was doing his job. He seemed fine. That's good. Carla's heavy sigh of relief made me painfully aware of just how concerned she was for Lutz. It made sense that she wouldn't approve of the adoption so easily. This is a letter of invitation from the temple's high priest. I held out the letter to Carla. She looked at it with eyes widened in disbelief, her face visibly paling. Why the temple? Lutz asked to go to the orphanage since he was abandoned. He's the one who ran away from home, yelled Carla, but yelling wouldn't make the letter go away. A letter of invitation from a noble couldn't be refused. After that happened, the high priest said he wanted to talk to Lutz's parents before accepting him into the orphanage, so... Please come with your husband, since you might need to take a day off work. It's scheduled for 3 days from now. He wants you to come to the temple at third bell. I explained the contents of the letter to Carla since she couldn't read. She squeezed the wooden board in her hand while looking between it and me. Third bell, 3 days from now? Uh-huh. If you show this letter to the guard, he should take you where you need to go. Oh boy. You know what? I'm going to keep going. I'm going to keep going, guys. I'm going to finish this. Today. Family meeting at the temple. The day of the meeting arrived after 3 days of anxious waiting. I hurriedly went to the temple, changed into my blue robes, and headed to the high priest's room. Lutz, who had been staying in one of my attendant rooms, was wearing his apprentice clothes. He stayed with me instead of in the orphanage at the high priest's instructions in order to prevent the real orphans from developing pointless hope. Man, I'm nervous. This has gotten way too big for a simple family discussion. By the time Lutz and I had arrived at the high priest's room, word of Benno and Mark arriving had already been delivered, and a gray priest was guiding the two of them there. Lutz's parents arrived just as Benno was finishing the long, verbose greeting made necessary by the presence of a noble. Just as I had heard, Lutz's father had the muscular build of one working in construction, though he wasn't particularly large. His skin was deeply tanned, and he had the look of someone who worked themselves sweaty outside. He had deeply furrowed brows and sharp jade eyes that reflected his obstinate personality well, while his almost white blonde hair made him look a little old. Lutz's father glanced at him, gave a snort, and then briefly introduced himself to the high priest. Carla followed him to the seats offered to them, and jerked in fear upon seeing Mark and Benno sitting on the opposite side. Seriously, Mark, what'd you do? What did you say? Have you already blackmailed her? I don't know what he said, and I kind of want to know, yet I don't want to know. When everyone was gathered in the high priest's room, the loud sound of third bell rang above us. The high priest was standing beside me. As he stated his greeting, I looked at the small magic tool in my hand. It was a sound-blocking magic tool made to prevent eavesdropping. When holding it, only a specific person could hear you, and the high priest was using it today since that only he could hear me if I tried to speak. In short, he was telling me to shut up and not interfere. When I protested so that I could help Lutz, he had this to say. What I need to make clear here are the thoughts and feelings of the parties involved. A third party such as yourself will only complicate the situation by getting involved. Especially since you are biased in Lutz's favor and thus not neutral. You'll get in the way. He was so blunt that I wanted to crack a joke about where all his euphemisms and aloofness had gone. The condition for me joining the meeting was carrying the magic tool, and so all I could do was sit in my chair like a doll. Frustratingly enough, both Benno and Mark had agreed with the high priest. The table was in the center of the room, and our chairs were placed on either side of it. The high priest and I sat on the side furthest into the room. Lutz sat opposite to us, his parents sat on the left, and Benno and Mark sat on the right. After finishing simple greetings and introductions, the high priest explained Lutz's position and his request. He had talked directly to Lutz and thus spoke of things that even I hadn't heard about. And such is Lutz's position. Is that right, Lutz? The high priest looked at Lutz, who nodded while looking self-conscious about his parents' presence. I internally shouted my support for him. He clenched a trembling fist and opened his mouth. No matter how hard I work, they don't accept me. Dad fights against every one of my dreams, and... Don't be a baby. Lutz's father, Deed, clenched his fist and shouted at Lutz. His shout was so loud that I actually jumped in my chair. He was probably used to shouting instructions to his co-workers. Well, when you're working in construction, it's going to get loud, so yeah. His bellowing voice felt loud enough to echo throughout the entire noble quarters, to say nothing of the high priest's solitary room. I felt my heart tighten with fear. He's so scary, oh my god, my heart can't take this. And it seemed I wasn't the only one who felt that way. Everyone tensed up and looked at Deed. Benno often thundered at me, but his volume and weight couldn't compare to the voice of a worker shouting outside all the time. You work hard, we don't accept you, how about you stop being a baby? He worked his shoulders and leaned forward toward Lutz, glaring at him so hard I could feel the pressure from here. His voice was loud and deep, even when he wasn't shouting so much that it was scary to hear even on the sidelines. Lutz paled after being shouted at in front of everyone, and since I was sitting in front of him, I could tell he was gritting his teeth hard to hold back tears. I bit my lip of frustration, unable to speak to him no matter how much I wanted to, and the high priest stood up from his seat beside me. He spoke in a calm voice that carried throughout the room despite its low volume, contrasting with Deed's bellowing voice. Deed, what exactly do you mean by don't be a baby? Please explain. You have to explain, or else we're not going to understand. Huh? What don't you get? Lutz is being a baby, ain't he? Deed crossed his arms and shook his head, failing to understand the high priest's question. His grimace implied that he had expected his statement to end there and then without anyone questioning it. Lutz feels frustrated that his hard work isn't being recognized, and you consider that being a baby, but I do not understand how exactly that is being a baby, as I have a little relation with craftsmen and the ways of the lower city. Please explain so that I can understand. Yeah, you wouldn't get it. Kinda hard to explain. He could have blown Lutz off by saying he should understand what he meant already, but that wouldn't work with the high priest. Yeah, especially since you can't really blow off the high priest like that. Deed stroked his chin and searched for an answer, probably not used to saying more than a few words at his line of work. He got a job we told him not to get. Of course he's going to work hard. Not even a season's passed since his baptism. What's there to accept? My stupid son's the one who picked a job he wouldn't get any help with. He knew what he was getting into. He knew he'd have to work so hard he'd spit blood and maybe never even make it to full-time work. So I'm saying, why is he complaining about it now? Does it make sense? Yes, that is much more clear. From that perspective, he certainly is being immature. Lutz, do you understand as well? Lutz gritted his teeth with frustration and lowered his eyes. On the other hand, Deed looked literally that his position had been understood. This meeting had been forced to happen entirely thanks to the high priest's status as a noble, but now that people were talking, I knew that Deed had arguably a reasonable position of his own. That wasn't something I could have learned just by talking to Lutz. Lutz, do you have a rebuttal? Or will you accept Deed's position as justified? The high priest quietly urged Lutz on. He slowly lifted his head to look at his parents. I'm not saying you have to appreciate how hard I'm working, but at the very least, can you accept that I'm gonna be a merchant? Pretty sure I already told you to do whatever you want. Deed furrowed his brows as if he didn't understand what Lutz is saying. I think that means essentially that, yeah, we've more or less accepted it. He scratched his head, then jutted his chin up and looked at Lutz. It didn't really look like he was still opposed to Lutz being a merchant. Do what I want. Huh? What does that mean? Or wait, does that mean... Lutz shook his head in confusion, and Carlo explained what he meant with a sigh. Your dad's saying he does accept your work, in his own way. Wait, Mom, if you know, tell me. How would I know? This is the first time I'm hearing him say that, said Carlo with a shrug. It seemed that his family had communication issues not only between brothers, but between husband and wife as well. Wow. How am I supposed to know that if you don't say it? Said Lutz, hanging his head weakly. I agreed with him, but thinking about it, Lutz didn't really say much about his position at home either, so maybe there really were just a family of people who kept their thoughts to themselves. Deed, may I take that as you not being opposed to Lutz working as a merchant? Asked the high priest. Deed nodded, looking like he wished he didn't have to explain every little thing he said. I think merchants are scum, and I don't know why he wants to be one willingly, but he's a man, and he chose this line of work on his own. He can use his guts to follow his dreams, whatever it takes, even if it means being a living apprentice, but whining and running off to the orphanage, it's pathetic. he said with a scoff, then crossed his arms and leaned back to signal he had said all he had to say. On instinct, I shouted, "No, that's wrong. This has all happened because of me. Les isn't trying to run away." But nobody heard me. Nobody even looked in my direction. I turned to look at the high priest, since he at least should have heard me, only to discover he wasn't even touching the magic tool hanging from his wrist on a chain. From the very beginning, he hadn't intended to hear a word I said. Mean. Dad, no, all this is about the orphanage was just my... Les began to say the same thing I intended to, then hurriedly shut his mouth. He squeezed his lips together, then shot his head up and glared at Deed. Then why won't you let me go to other cities for work? Les finally brought up the core reason why he had run away from home, his parents not permitting him to leave the city. That was unbearable for Les, since he had become a merchant specifically to leave the city, but even so, he was once again shot down with a single sentence. You would know if you had thought about it for a second, shouted Dee, but Les had run away from home precisely because he didn't understand. The high priest shook his head with a sigh and spoke once again, but he doesn't understand, so please explain yourself. Again? Dee, looking worn out, slapped his forehead, then after mumbling that he was bad, these kinds of things, spoke with that while furrowing his brows. You becoming a merchant and you leaving the city are two different things. It's dangerous outside these walls. There's bandits and ferocious beasts. No place to be taking kids. That's right, it's way too dangerous out there. Deed and Carla's explanations floored me. I had only gone to the forest close to the town, so I never really knew this, but it was apparently very dangerous outside the city. It was normal here for kids to go outside the walls together at the forest. We went so casually that it might as well have been part of the city, so I never thought that the outside was so dangerous that parents wouldn't want their kids leaving the city. Not to mention, traveling minstrels and merchants were so common that even Les could meet them on a regular basis. The inns in the east were filled with travelers going to and fro. That led to me associating the difficulties of travel purely with the walking distance or the inconvenience of horses and carriages. It didn't help that I had frequently seen Benno, the adult closest to me that wasn't my parent, leaving for other cities to set up workshops and handle the businesses. I never really felt like the outside was that dangerous. I still don't really understand this world too well. About 2 years had passed since I first came here, but I was still as ignorant as could be. As I sighed heavily, the high priest blinked once in confusion. I won't say there is no danger at all, but Benno would be going to a city only half a day carriage ride away from the east gate. Walking would be one thing, but I did not see the need to worry about such a short carriage ride. He doesn't need to go, stated Deed flatly. Les flushed with anger and glared at him. I'm telling you, it's part of my job. Calm down, Les. Deed, what do you mean by that? The high priest stopped Les with a gesture and asked Deed for an explanation. By this point, Deed naturally expected that and looked at Benno and Mark without pausing. This guy says he wants to bring Les so he can help make a workshop. And? Why is he wanting a Lahange and an apprentice at that to learn that kind of stuff? It's not necessary because he's a Lahange. He's not a Lahurl. I think that's what the term is. Lahurl? A Lahange apprentice was the practical equivalent of a 3-year internship back in Japan. The focus would be on teaching them the fundamentals, the simple manual labor, and the like. One might send a Lahange to another city to work at a newly opened store, but they wouldn't be involved in establishing a new store or setting up a workshop. I knew that Les's dream was to go to other cities, so I had just been glad he was accomplishing that, but from a normal perspective, it really just wasn't a Lahange's job to do that kind of thing. It was the job of a Lahurl or a successor. Not just something Les needed to do himself. Deed's position was that it wasn't necessary for him to risk himself going outside the city to do work not in his contract made perfect sense. The high priest and I both looked at Benno simultaneously. He sighed and looked at Deed. As I told you the other day, after thinking about Les's abilities and my future plans for opening stores, I conclude that I would like to raise Les into my successor. Showing him the creation of workshops in another city is one part of that, and it's also why I would like to adopt him. Don't even think about it. Yeah, Deed shot down Benno's suggestion on the spot. He then looked around at everyone and murmured, That needs an explanation too? The high priest confirmed that it did indeed need one, backed up by a nod from Benno, who said, I would like to hear your reasoning. If you'll forgive my rudeness, you will be of no help to Les's career due to your lack of involvement in business. My adopting Les will be good not only for my business, but for his future as well. Benno's words made Deed lower his eyes briefly. He then shot a glare straight at Benno. You don't have any kids, yeah? Yes, which is why I'm considering Les as a potential successor. Benno furrowed his brow, not understanding what him not having kids had to do with anything. He would have no reason to adopt Les if he already had kids. That's not what I meant, Deed said, giving a heavy sigh. You're right that I can't help Les, and I'm grateful that you think highly of him. His eyes wavered as he searched for words until he looked back and forth between Les and Benno. You're good at running a business, and I bet you're a skilled merchant. You're even got the heart to forgive all the trouble Les has given you. But you wouldn't be a good father. Ooh. He wasn't insulting Benno or slandering his name, but still he was rejecting him. For some reason he thought he wouldn't be a good father. Please explain why you think he wouldn't be a good father. Does Benno have a bad reputation or something of the sort? Asked the high priest, to which Deed nodded. This would be easier if he did, he said, then looked at Benno head on. No matter how good at your job you are, you're trying to adopt a kid not for his sake, but for your business. Nobody like that would be a good father. Parents can't think about everything as pluses and minuses. Am I wrong? Benno opened his eyes wide in surprise, then gave a bitter smile. I see. You are correct. I am certainly prioritizing the profits of business above all else. Benno was considering adopting Lutz because it would be the most beneficial thing for him and his business. Naturally, Lutz's personality and other qualities helped, but when it came to a successor for his business, future profits mattered above all else. That was normal for a merchant, but it would be hard for Benno to protest a parent finding fault in it. I understand why you rejected the adoption. However, I am utterly serious about Lutz's future potential. Would you find a Lahurl contract more agreeable than adoption? If Lahandras were like part-timers, then Lahurls were like managers that could eventually be trusted with the operation of a business. The security, payment, and work offered by the employer changed drastically. I'm thinking it's too early for that. Too early? This time Deed didn't even try to hide his annoyance at the high priest's question. He shrugged with a frown and explained, Naturally, Lahurls are signed after you watch them work as a Lahandras for a few years. Haven't even been a single season since Lutz's baptism, he said, earning him a raised eyebrow from Benno. It hasn't been long since his baptism, but I have been doing business with Lutz for an entire year now. That a fact? Yes, I imagine you're aware of the financial burden an employer shoulders by hiring an apprentice. When I first met Lutz, I had no intention of hiring him. With that in mind, as a test to assess his skills, I gave him a task to complete that most would find impossible. However, he succeeded with flying colors, far beyond what I had expected. Oh? Deed was listening as if he had never heard any of this. If I remembered correctly, at the time, Deed had told Lutz to just become a paper-making craftsman instead of a merchant. Maybe he didn't ask Lutz why he was making paper? Maybe Lutz just didn't tell him? Lutz has shown himself to have the determination and endurance necessary to overcome the disadvantages that his lack of a merchant upbringing has given him. I want to secure his employment before another store does, and the sooner I begin raising him to potentially be my successor, the better. I value his work ethic, but he has a long way to go. All right, then. Deed nodded, and then, after glancing at the high priest who was starting to stand up, explained what he meant. No matter how much I want to help him, I don't know nothing about being a merchant. If you're thinking you want to trust a whole business to him, that contract will do him a lot of good. In that case, said Mark with a smile, I suggest that we immediately fill out the paperwork at the Merchants Guild. Deed grimaced, looking thoroughly displeased. You merchants and your dad? A whisper leaked out of Lutz's mouth. His dad cutting himself off mid-insult was the cherry on top of the cake that showed Lutz just how much he loved him. Tears dripped out of his jade-green eyes that looked just like Deed's. Carla was quietly sobbing too, and Deed looked extremely uncomfortable stuck between them. He averted his eyes from them and scratched his head. His expression made it clear that he was finally feeling the embarrassment of saying everything he usually left unsaid. Let's apologize, shouted Deed out of nowhere. It was hard to tell from his tan skin, but his cheek looked a little red. Deed, you must explain if you want him to understand, pointed at the high priest with a sigh. Deed grimaced, faltered for a second, then yelled at Lutz. You going crazy with your misunderstandings, got this many people wrapped up in this mess. Apologize with all you've got. Deed's words stabbed a spear into my chest. Lutz hadn't gotten this many people involved. I had. I'm sorry. Lutz and I apologized together, though nobody could hear my apology. Lutz's parents were looking at Lutz, but the high priest, Benno, and Mark were all staring directly at me. Come on, we're going home, you brat. Lutz rushed up to Deed, who gave him a solid chop on the head. Despite wiping his tears away with a grunt of pain, Lutz looked really happy as he stood beside his father. Guess I should say something, too. Guess I wasn't being clear enough. You helped us out. Thanks. Looking somewhat embarrassed, Deed thanked the high priest before turning around and leaving the room. Carla took Lutz's hand and they walked off together. Master Benno, let us go to the Merchants Guild. High priest, I truly thank you with utmost sincerity for today. It seems that everything has been resolved peacefully. After giving a long-winded thank you, Benno left the room. He was probably chasing after Lutz and his parents so they could get the Lahurl contract sorted out at the Merchants Guild. The moment Benno and Mark left the room, leaving only the high priest and me behind, some grey priests came inside to clean up the chairs and such. Take care to hear all sides of a story before making a decision. The truth will always be distorted if you listened only to what one person has to say. Understood, I said in an inaudible voice with a nod, after which the high priest gripped the magic tool chained to his wrist. Thankfully, it seems their family will be doing just fine. I blinked in surprise at his sudden words and looked up at the high priest. Upon seeing my confusion, his emotionless, expressionless face twisted in a slight grimace. Did you not say so yourself? Your ideal revolution will be resolving the problem and returning Lutz home to his family, he said, reminding me of Lutz's happy, tearful expression. The thought of Lutz, who had been frustrated with his family problems for almost a year, crying happy tears while going home with Dee and Carla, made my eyes tear up too. It's perfect, it really is. Things had gotten twisted because none of them really talked to each other. But they still had love for each other. I was really glad Lutz got to fix things with his family. Mine, stop crying. People might misunderstand and think I'm the one making you cry. Yeah, they probably would. The high priest, having noticed the gray priest glancing our way, made a much more clear grimace this time. It's fine, these are happy tears. Good grief, mine. I tried to wipe my tears with my blue robe, but the high priest grabbed me and told me not to wipe my face with my clothes. But I didn't have a handkerchief, and Fran, who probably did, seemed busy. Upon seeing me following Fran with my eyes, the high priest lent me his own handkerchief with a very unhappy expression. His name was embroidered on it, and for the first time, I learned that the high priest's name was Ferdinand. Epilogue! Finally, and then we'll be getting to Book 5, guys. After leaving the temple, Dee headed south to the Merchant's Guild while watching Lutz and Carla walk together, holding hands. They were on their way to sign Lutz's Lahurl contract. It was a result Dee hadn't even considered when he was summoned to the temple. To be honest, he was uneasy about what would happen at the time, but in the end, everything got wrapped up about as well as it possibly could have. All thanks to that high priest. Dee himself knew that he wasn't communicating with his son properly, but he didn't know how to fix that either. It was precisely because a noble who knew nothing of the lower city's way of life got involved that he had managed to speak his mind in full despite not generally doing so. But still, why was Gunter's daughter in the temple? Uh-oh. And wearing the same blue robes as a noble at that. That girl quietly sitting next to the high priest in the same blue robes as him had unmistakably been mine, one of Gunter's daughters. She didn't go outside much, but Dee remembered her clearly since she went to the same baptism ceremony as Lutz. He had heard about the two of them making stuff together, but not about her joining the temple. Dee was certain he often heard Lutz saying he was off to go get mine in the morning. That shouldn't have anything to do with nobles. He didn't understand why mine was in the temple, but he did know that the high priest uncharacteristically got involved with matters of the lower city and gathered everyone for a discussion at mine's behest. Dad, this is the Merchant's Guild, said Lutz while pointing at a large building located at one side of the central plaza. Dee pushed mine into the corner of his mind and looked up at the guild. As a carpenter who worked in construction by trade, Dee had never set foot in the Merchant's Guild before. Normally, only those who dealt directly with money worked with the guild. For a second, Dee hesitated at stepping into a world unfamiliar to him, but after seeing Lutz walk in like it was nothing, he snorted and followed in after him. He climbed a narrow staircase and found themselves in a hallway filled with people, forming lines who were all dressed like them. Dee had gotten uncharacteristically nervous for what awaited within the building, but in the end it was still a place for guys like him. Or so he thought, until the Gilberta Company trio passed through the lines and went further inside. At the end of the hallway was a metal gate with a guard. Lutz, Benno, and Mark took out golden card things, and the gate did something with them. Immediately after, a streak of white ran through the gate, and it disappeared as if melting into thin air. The sight of Lutz dealing naturally with a magic tool made by nobles hit Dee with a strange feeling. He felt as if his son had already gone somewhere forever out of reach. He looked down at Lutz with his mouth bent into a frown just as his son turned around and held out his hands. Dad, Mom, hold my hands. It's the only way for people without guild cards to go upstairs. It had been so long since he had held hands with his son that they were much bigger than he remembered, which threw him off as they climbed the dimly lit staircase. At the top awaited the world for the rich, overflowing with wealth like he had never seen before. The floorboards weren't bare, they were covered with a thick carpet, and the chairs in the waiting room were beautiful with fancy designs. Everything was clean. It was impossible not to feel how out of place he was, but Lutz, wearing his well-made apprentice clothes and talking to the young apprentice girl behind the counter, I'm guessing that's Frida, seemed completely in his element. What brings you here today? Please prepare a Lahurl contract. I have my parents and the master of the Gilberta Company here with me. Understood, and congratulations, Lutz. Yeah, thanks, Frida. Lutz acted and spoke entirely different from how he did at home. Not even a full season had passed since his baptism ceremony. Dee had thought that wasn't enough time for anything, but Lutz's enormous growth was impossible to ignore. He was already making connections and paving a road for himself as an apprentice merchant. This was the contract for making Lutz a Lahurl apprentice. Neither Dee nor Carla could read the words written on the parchment spread out in front of them. They couldn't help but tense up on guard against merchants exploiting their lack of comprehension to trick them. Lutz, read the contract for your parents. It was commonplace for commoners to screw themselves by signing contracts they couldn't read. It made sense then that it was important for illiterates to have someone they could trust to read things that out loud for them. Lutz nodded at Benno's request and began to read. Dee had heard from Carla that Lutz was studying letters on a stone slate over the winter, but he didn't know Lutz had learned enough to read contracts. Benno saying that Lutz was using his determination to overcome his disadvantages hadn't been a lie or exaggeration at all. Guess he wasn't being a baby after all. Deed was a bit impressed with Lutz as he fluently read aloud the contract, explained all the unique terms of phrase that merchants used. At the same time, it would feel kind of weird to praise his son for something he had been ignoring up until now, so he snorted dismissively. The contract described how Lutz would be treated going forward. He would be treated as a Laharo, but continue living with his parents for the time being. Most Laharos signed at the age of 10, so once he reached that age, he would be living at the Gilberta Company like the others. He would be given a room to put his stuff and change clothes, and the company would provide his lunch. They would also provide dinner if he needed it. When work called for going outside the city, he would go with them at times. His pay would be increased by a small amount. The contract ended after describing a bit more about his work conditions and pay. And now you're a Laharo at our company, Lutz. I expect you to work twice as hard as you have been. Yes, Master Benno. And, Dad, Mom, I'm really glad you accept me. Thank you. I won't ever complain or whine. I'm going to be a crazy good merchant and make you both proud, said Lutz with a beaming smile. Dieter replied by saying, You better not whine. You've made your decision. Don't even think about complaining. But that just made his son's eyes sparkle with a defiant light. Look at you being a man. Deed, Carla, I'm going to ask you don't tell anyone about what happened at the temple today, said Benno while handing the signed contract to Mark. You're talking about Gunter's daughter, yeah? Why was she there, and why was she wearing the clothes of a noble? The only people who joined the temple were orphans who didn't have any family or job they could rely on. Becoming a priest meant signing your life away to live as a slave of the nobility. It was hard to imagine Gunter letting his daughter do that. When he was the kind of father who loved his kids so much, he'd even raise a sick child like mine instead of letting her die to have less mouths to feed. There's a lot of things in the world you're better off not knowing. Deed saw Benno's expression harden as he looked at him and Carla head-on with his dark red eyes. Deed swallowed hard. Benno's look had the pressure only one who was prepared to lose everything could have. Mine's stuck living life with nobles now. People who can't protect themselves from nobles will be better off not getting involved with her. I know that, said Deed, before looking at Lutz. So you don't get too close with mine either, boy. Deed swallowed what he had to say. Lutz hadn't even told his family that mine had entered the temple with blue robes. He never mentioned going to the temple when he left in the morning. It was clear that Lutz was sticking with mine, knowing full well the risk of doing so. Deed sighed slowly, thinking of mine wearing her blue robes and sitting next to the high priest, sitting on the noble's side. He then jabbed the back of Lutz's head. Ow! Why'd you do that, Dad? Stay strong, Lutz. Don't lose sight of the road you're walking down. Huh? Right. Lutz nodded in an expression that made his latter lack of comprehension clear. But nonetheless, it seemed to Deed that his son's eyes were locked right on the path he had chosen for himself. Okay. How much more do I have left? A place still far from here. Tuli, do you have a second? I want you to take care of a customer for me. I'll be right there. When the forewoman's aide came calling for me, I made sure the stitches I just did were neat, then set aside my needles and took off my apron in a hurry. Shut up! I quickly checked to see if my hair had clothes had any stray thread or dirt on them. Okay, perfect. Just as mine had said, my bosses began letting me handle customers once I started keeping myself clean. Not only that, but ever since Mrs. Karina stuck to that deal of mine, she had started borrowing me from our workshop so they could ask me more about how to make hairpins. Our forewoman desperately wanted connections to the Gilberta Company, and thanks to my help on that front, she started letting me do more work all at once. In the spring, I had been one of the lowest Lahandras in the workshop. By summer, everything had changed. I was happy about that, but now people in the workshops gossiped about how I was the only one who got to deal with customers. Rita and Laura even complained to my face that the forewoman had started playing favorites with me all of a sudden. They ended up complaining at lunch, too, leaving me pouting while feeling kind of uncomfortable. Don't complain to me, I'm just doing what mine told me to. When I told Rita and Laura about mine had told me about being polite and staying clean like a representative of the workshop should be, their eyes widened in surprise. Why does mine know all that? She's too weak to even go to the forest. Laura was our neighbor and knew just how weak mine was. But she was a year older than me and had barely met her since she was an apprentice by the time mine managed to get strong enough to go to the forest. She'd only really met her when she pulled out mine's hair stick at the baptism ceremony and got anxious about it. Mine's too weak to walk around much, but she uses her head instead and helps Dad work at the gate. She reads letters and does math stuff. Apparently she learned how to talk to nobles and rich store owners while she was there. In truth, mine had started going to the temple as a blue shrine maiden, but Mom and Dad had told me not to tell anyone about that. Everyone else thought she was going to help Dad at the gate or visiting the Gilberta Company to discuss hairpins. She did go to the Gilberta Company with Lutz sometimes, so it wasn't completely untrue. Wow, she can read? That's really cool. Rita opened her eyes wide with surprise. She lived on the opposite side of the city, with the craftsman's alley between us, so she had never seen mine before. Rita being impressed despite that made me happy. Mine's amazing. She got to know someone from the Gilberta Company while working at the gate, which is how Mrs. Karina noticed the hairpins mine made. And then she even bought the rights to the hairpins. Normally mine would be going to teach her how to make them, but I go instead since she's too weak to go that far. I decided not to mention that mine was worse than me at making the hairpins. If everyone learned she was bad at sewing, on top of being sickly, mine would never be able to get married. As her big sister, it was my job to stop that from happening. You're so lucky, Tuli. You got to go to Mrs. Karina's home thanks to her, right? I wish I had a little sister like mine, too. Maybe the 4 women would play favorites with me instead, said Laura with an envious sigh. But a few weeks ago, you were saying it must be a huge pain to look after a sick little sister. I felt a bit peeved at Laura's opinion changing on a dime, at which point I realized something and clapped my hands together. If everyone followed mine's advice, I wouldn't be the only one asked to deal customers. When I went to Mrs. Karina's house, like she was making a super beautiful dress, asked her how to make wonderful designs for nobles, and mine told me what I needed to do. What'd mine say? The two of them now, knowing that mine's advice was amazing, leaned forward and looked at me with anticipation sparkling in their eyes. She said I should go to the north of the city on my days off and look at what people were wearing so I could note down what designs were popular with rich people. She said I won't know what's good if I don't look at good things, so I was thinking of going to the north on my day off tomorrow. Want to come with me? Yeah, me too. Rita and Laura both jumped on my invitation immediately. I sighed in relief. I invited them for one simple reason. Unlike mine and Lutz, who were up north frequently to visit the Gilberta Company, I was still nervous that I never had the courage to go further north than the Central Plaza. I thought that maybe having 2 friends by my side would make it easier. When the next day came, I finished breakfast quickly and grabbed the clothes I had washed and set out to dry last night. They were the summer clothes I had worn to Karina's house. Just having worn them to the north once before gave me a bit of courage. Bye, mine. I'm going to the north. I hope you learn a lot there. Good luck, Tuli. Mine waved me goodbye. I honestly would have liked for her to come with me, but she didn't want to since Rita and Laura would be there. She said they wouldn't walk at her pace and she'd just be dead weight, falling behind and passing out. I left home and raced down the stairs to the plaza. God, this recording's going to go on forever. Where I found Laura walking around the well. Morning, Tuli, let's go. Rita's probably waiting for us already. Laura and I weaved through the narrow alleyway on our way to the Craftsman's Alley. We found Rita in no time. Laura, Tuli, morning. Morning, Rita. I was so excited I couldn't even sleep last night, said Laura, jumping toward Rita with excitement. We started walking north and almost immediately passed by some kids we knew heading to the forest. Oh, it's Tuli and Laura. Going out somewhere for fun? Maybe the market? No, we're studying. You're all going to the forest, right? Good luck. We waved each other goodbye and then found the people heading from the Craftsman's Alley to their place of work. Along the way, we talked exclusively about sewing and fashion. Hey, Tuli, talk about the time you went to Mrs. Karina's house. They wanted to hear about the clothes and stuff Karina had shown me, so I thought back to that day and tried to describe what I had been told. But Karina had used so many words I didn't know that it was naturally impossible for me to remember all the details. That reminded me how mine would always write stuff down on her notepad thing and look at it when she forgot something. I might need to learn to read too. There were many carts rattling up and down the street of the Craftsman's Alley, but there weren't any carriages. Most people here were the same kind of clothes we were used to. They were all patched up clothes bought from used stores. But as we approached the Central Plaza, the stitching got better, the clothing got more colorful, and the amount of cloth used increased. By the time we started to see people wearing accessories, the plaza was right in front of us. We entered the plaza while talking excitedly amongst ourselves. There were a ton of people heading from the plaza to the port in the western part of town, so the fashion was indescribably varied. The clothes fancier, but there were carriages on the street as well instead of just wagons. Rita, whose house was on the far southwest of town, opened her eyes wide after entering the Central Plaza. I don't usually come to the plaza since I could just take the alleys to the market. I didn't realize so many different people were here. And now that I look, there's a lot of blue clothes. Maybe because it's the divine color of summer? She said, prompting me to focus my attention on the clothes in the Central Plaza. As she said, it did feel like there were a lot of blue clothes. I looked over the crowd while thinking back to what Karina had taught me when suddenly my eyes fell on a woman's skirt. Wow, that skirt looks amazing. Just a couple of pleats make it look so fancy. Mine's baptism outfit was amazing too, wasn't it? Mine just pinched up the extra cloth since she's shorter than me, but they're the same thing, I guess what matters is looking fancy is using extra cloth. I couldn't help but smile at Laura's point. It was true that mine's baptism clothes had been super cute and fancy thanks to how Mom and I had altered them, but thanks to that we got wrapped up in a lot of trouble. On that day I learned an important lesson. Fancy doesn't always mean better. There was the Merchants Guild and other minor guilds near the Central Plaza, so there were a lot of people moving around from a lot of different social classes. But if I paid attention, I could tell what social classes someone was from by the clothes they were wearing. When I went to the second-hand store to pick out mine's clothes, I learned to match clothes with skin tone and hair color, plus how one could show their social class by how they dressed. Les and I had picked dresses that would look good on mine, but she had picked other clothes entirely. I thought back to that and pointed at the woman walking by with the blouse, skirt, and corset. Look, that girl's not just wearing a dress. If you have extra money, you can buy 3 separate pieces of clothes, right? A blouse, a skirt, and a corset. You can change the feel of an outfit completely by swapping out one part, or like switching the hem of a blouse, or changing lace on a sleeve. That's true. Thule, you're smart. Well, it's not me who's smart. Just a bit further and we'll be in the north of town. We made it to the north of the plaza without any issue, but everyone past there was the land of rich people. Taking the first step inside was scary. We gathered together at the north exit, and I looked over my clothes. Laura and Rita noticed that and suddenly fell silent, their expressions clouding as they looked nervously over their own clothes. Hey, Thule, are we really going to the north? You've been to Mrs. Karina's workshop before, so you're fine there, right? Laura pushed me forward, but I just planted my feet on the ground without taking a step. Karina's workshop wasn't too far from the plaza, and she always sent someone to guide me. Is it okay for us to go to the north? Asked Rita, nervously grabbing my hand. Well, what if we just keep looking at the clothes in the plaza? I haven't taken a good look yet. Agreed. There's still a lot we have to learn here. The 3 of us walked around the plaza's fountain, holding hands and paying attention to everyone's clothes. We circled around it 5 times while observing the passerby. But we had come all this way to go to the north, and it wasn't so easy to stop thinking about it. In the middle of one rotation, we are all subconsciously slowed down as we neared the north exit. Thule, why have you been walking around the fountain like that? Wait, why are you here? I'm running an errand at the Merchants Guild. You were here when I came and here when I finished, so I got curious, said Lutz while pointing at the Merchants Guild and looking at us oddly. Now that he mentioned it, we really had been looking suspicious. Someone we knew had seen us walking in circles around the Central Plaza without leaving to the north. Oh no, this is super embarrassing. How should I explain this to Lutz? I cradled my head and trembled in embarrassment, but Lauren just laughed and slapped Lutz on the shoulder. The truth is, Thule asked us to go to the north of the city with her to look at rich people clothes, but she got too nervous to leave the plaza, and... Wait, Lutz, you're wearing really nice clothes. Where'd they come from? It looked like Laura still didn't know that Lutz had been hired by the Gilberta Company. She looked over his apprentice uniform from head to toe, tilting her head in confusion. This is the apprentice uniform for the Gilberta Company. I gotta get back to work, but you can come with me to the store if you want. What? Really? We had found an unexpected guide, and I was overjoyed. With Lutz taking the lead, we finally managed to leave the plaza and head north. Since only rich people lived here, there were only way more carriages and the wagons and everything. Looked different from the south of the city where we lived. There were a lot of thin, tall buildings in the south, but here every building was bigger, and once you reached the wooden third floors, they started getting painted with pretty colors. Thule, haven't you been here a few times? I have, but coming here still makes me nervous. I'm not ready to go on my own yet. Lutz shook his head with exasperation, but still took us all the way to the front of the Gilberta Company. He then dashed inside, saying he had to get back to work. Lutz really is a full-grown apprentice here, huh? Laura looked up at the Gilberta Company with her mouth hanging open. Mine and Lutz always went inside like it was nothing, but to us it was like an impregnable fortress. Even if we wanted to go inside, the guard by the door would probably turn us away. For some time we stood in front of the Gilberta Company, observing the people passing by. There were more people wearing frilly clothing than before, and at the very least we didn't see anyone wearing patched-up clothes. Compared to what we had seen in the plaza, the designs were a lot more consistent and regular. That probably reflected the trends that mine and Karina had been talking about. I can tell the clothes rich people wear are amazing, but I don't think I can make them myself. I don't have the cloth to practice with, and I don't even know how I'd start with making them, said Rita with a shrug. Laura nodded in agreement. These aren't the clothes our customers want for sure. It feels like they're out of our reach, really far away from what we can do. Maybe for studying, we should just stick to the plaza. I had worked side by side with Laura and Rita for a long time now, so their opinions being entirely different from mine shocked me. I wanted to stay here and look at more rich people clothing. I wanted to practice making them myself like I had with mine's baptism outfit, even if it meant making tiny clothes for dolls. I wanted to get better with everyone and move to a better workshop where our next hands renewal came, but both of them gave up immediately, thinking it was too much for them. I realized that at some point our goals and ways of thinking had changed. We didn't share the same dream anymore, and that left me at a loss. Want to go home for today? I asked, since they looked really uncomfortable. They nodded and we began our journey back to the plaza, but my legs and heart felt heavy. I walked while staring at my feet, complaining on the inside. Why are we going home already? We came all the way here. I haven't even seen enough yet. The two of them think these clothes are too much for us, but I don't think so. I don't want to think that. After a bit of walking, I stopped and turned around. I could see customers entering the Gilberta Company. They were probably there for Karina, since their clothes looked a lot like the examples I had seen in her room. So pretty. I want to look at them more. The thought of the dresses for nobles I had seen in Karina's house passed through my mind. It was exactly because I was out of my reach. It was out of my reach that I wanted to study and practice more. I wanted to become good enough to join Karina's workshop. Lutz and mine had managed to get accepted by the Gilberta Company, so maybe if I worked hard. Too. I guess I'm thinking like this because of mine. Mine always worked desperately hard to get what she wanted, and she always succeeded. Especially since she had Lutz, who walked down his own road in life, even after his parents rejected him. I didn't want to settle for anything less. I didn't want to think something was impossible for me, or out of my reach. I wanted to charge forward on my own path. What's wrong, Thule? The two of them stopped walking ahead and turned around. I looked up and waved at them with a smile. Sorry you can go home without me, but now that I'm here, I want to learn until I'm satisfied. The Gilberta Company was still a distant dream for me, but I wouldn't give up. At the very least, I needed to work hard until I could pick out better clothes than mine. I would be ashamed of myself as a seamstress if I couldn't even beat her when it came to clothes. I turned around and headed back to the Gilberta Company, then stood and observed the clothes of people passing by. I won't lose to mine, because, come on, I'm her older sister. An attendant's self-awareness. Gil, you know what to do? Yeah. Right after breakfast, we started preparing the workshop. Today we're going to the forest with Lutz, Gunther, and Thule taking the lead. Apparently the forest was totally different from the lower city. We'd learn how to make paper there, and then make it in the workshop. I was fine doing it just because Sister Mine asked me to, but the other kids weren't too happy about having extra work. Kai, a kid I used to mess around with in the orphanage before becoming Sister Mine's attendant, looked down at his clothes and grimaced. They were second-hand and all patched up, looking even worse than the gray robes he normally wore. Hey, Gil, what's the point of making paper? That was a question I didn't really have an answer to. I looked at Lutz since he usually understood Sister Mine's plans the best. He noticed my look and started to think. Life in the temple was so different from life in the city that explaining things could be hard sometimes. You guys wouldn't understand if I said we're selling the paper to the Gilberta Company. Let's see. It'll get mine more money, so that won't work either. Money's not a thing here. Alright, basically you'll get more food to eat. Really? Kai's eyes shone with glee. The food situation at the orphanage had improved a bit thanks to Sister Mine, but it still wasn't enough. More food would make everyone happy here. Alright, let's go. Let's get this paper made. It's crazy, huh? All we had to do was follow Sister Mine's instructions, and now we can make our own soup. We didn't have to sit around waiting for more divine gifts at all. Kai and the others talking reminded me of how the orphanage was not so long ago. With more and more blue priests and shrine maidens leaving the temple, more and more former attendants returned to the orphanage. There were more gray priests, but less food. Everyone got less divine gifts, and everyone was hungry all the time. No new blue priests came to the temple at all until Sister Mine, so nobody got taken as an attendant, and nobody got more food. At first I thought a commoner blue shrine maiden would suck, but only Sister Mine would do all this, huh? Only she would tell us if we want to eat, we should just make our own food. Sister Mine had taught everyone in the orphanage how to make soup, and bought us ingredients to use. It was a revolution that upended the tradition of the orphanage, just waiting for prepared food to trickle down. You know, she's not just sending you guys to the forest to teach you to make paper. She's thinking that if you learn even a little bit about the food that grows in the forest, you'll be able to save yourselves from starvation if it comes down to that, explained Lutz. Kai's eyes widened, then he smiled a bit. I'm glad Sister Mine became the orphanage director. No other blue robe would try and make things better for us. Then you better work hard and make some good paper for her. Yeah. We distributed knives, baskets, and so on to the eager children, then got to the pots and steamers necessary to make paper ready. It was time to go to the forest. Sister Mine, I'm going to go learn. I'm going to pay attention. Yes, Gil, go learn to gather and make paper well, said Mine. I nodded hard and then saw that Lutz was waving his hand high, giving instructions to everyone since he was the most familiar with the kids from the orphanage. Be sure to stick close to Mr. Gunther. They won't let you out of the gate if you're on your own. Gunther was Sister Mine's father, and Thule was her older sister, or so I heard. Dang it. I didn't really know what those words meant. Sister Mine explained that they were her family, people she lived with, but it just didn't click for me. They were probably like her attendants that stayed with her when she was in the lower city. Or maybe they were like the other orphans were to me, since we used to live together. I didn't understand what families were, but I hoped one day she could rely on me as much as she relied on them. When we left the gate, the scenery changed instantly. Unlike the pure white temple, the lower city was brown and absolutely stunk. Thank you! Somebody mentioned this in the stupid books. I know they probably mentioned it at the beginning, but still. I was happy just to leave the pent-up temple, but some of the others were scrunching their faces up. Gunther noticed that and shrugged. This place isn't like your nice and clean temple, huh? It's dirty, smelly, loud, and there's tons of people. Also, it feels weird that the buildings aren't white. One of the orphans spoke up and the others nodded while looking around. Well, then again, from what I can tell, the orphanage probably didn't smell good either, so this is probably something similar to what they normally would smell anyway. So, yeah. The orphanage felt cramped from all the gray priests being sent back, but there were so many people in the city that there wasn't much more space. It was so loud here that it was hard to believe how silent they were told to be in the temple. The first time I left the temple, I got so excited at all the people and stuff to see that I actually felt a little sick afterwards. What's that? I've never seen any of those things before. Everyone's wearing all sorts of different clothes. Is that a blue shrine maiden over there? An orphan pointed at a woman wearing blue clothing, and immediately they all stepped to the side of the road and knelt down. No. There's no blue shrine maidens or priests in the city. You don't need to kneel. Really? Half kneeling, they froze in place and nervously watched the woman, afraid that they were going to be yelled at. It made me want to cradle my head. Sister Mine and Les had definitely felt the same way when Fran and I had visited the city for the first time. Those who had been sheltered in the temple stuck out like a sore thumb in the city. They clearly weren't used to everything. I spent all their time looking around, which was extremely suspicious. I tried to teach them what I could from my trips to the lower city. Only buildings for nobles are pure white. In other words, commoner buildings have lots of colors. Unlike the temple, there are no rules for how everything has to look. There's lots of colors. People who are rich, like people with a lot of money, live here, so everything's pretty, but the further south we go, the dirtier it'll get. The people down there will be wearing clothes like ours. How can we know all this, Gil? Asked a kid while blinking in confusion. I puffed out my chest of pride. I go outside the temple all the time to accompany Sister Mine on her commute. In the past, I had mainly just been sent to the repentance chamber by the caretaker priests. I never got attention for any good reasons. But despite my pride, Lutz patted my shoulder and reminded me that I had messed up in the lower city plenty of times myself. Don't touch anything you see until I say so. The first time Gil went to the city, he stole some fruit thinking it was a divine gift and got yelled at. Unlike the temple, there's physical punishment down here. Don't do anything that'll get people mad at you. They'll shout out of nowhere and punch you in the face. It hurts, and it's scary. Lutz revealing my past mistakes made the kids laugh. They chattered among themselves saying, don't touch anything in the city, they'll get mad. I was finally earning some respect, but Lutz ruined it. The scenery changed a bit again at the central plaza. The wood parts of buildings that used to be colored turned brown, and the buildings themselves got narrower. The clothes people wore lost their color and turned into the same raggedy patched clothes we were wearing. Even the attitude of people changed. Oh boy, how many times do I gotta teach you this lesson? A shout unlike anything you would hear in the temple shot through the air, and an older man dropped a fist on a young adult repairing some building. Physical punishment. Thule, is it truly okay to be violent like that? A gray shrine maiden squeezed Thule's sleeves, trembling. Thule gave an uncomfortable smile. Sometimes people won't learn unless they get yelled at. Now, you don't need to be scared. It won't happen to you if you don't do anything to make people mad. The further south we went, the louder the voices got. Shouts echoed through the air and gave the city a scary atmosphere completely unlike the temple's quiet ambiance. There's even scarier people in the alley, so don't go off on your own. Keep walking straight to the gate up ahead, said Thule while pointing to a large gate at the other side of the street. The orphans weren't just listening to Thule because they were scared of the city. She was their teacher, the one who taught them how to make soup. Lutz and Thule were basically the same age as me, but they could do lots of things, and were a big help to Sister Mine. The only things I could do without help were clean and accompany her on her commute. Everything else I was in the middle of learning from Fran, so it was hard to call me very useful. Maybe due to how much scarier the south of the city was, everyone subconsciously sped up until we reached the gate. It resembled the temple gate, but was even larger. Apparently there wasn't any more city beyond this gate. Before going through, Gunter held up a hand and told everyone to stop. I'm going to go make sure they know about us. Hey, Otto. Gunter disappeared into the gate, and we were stuck at the front of it. Curious eyes fell on us from the other people waiting at the gate. To those who had never left the temple, they were an entirely unknown world. I had been told my whole life that I must never leave the temple, so being outside made a sense of guilt spread through my chest. The other kids seemed to feel the same way, judging by how they were looking increasingly uneasy. You don't need to worry, everyone. Dad's with us, said Thule, smiling gently. Guards needed to keep watch every day to stop people they didn't know from going in and out of the city. Apparently, so that was their job to look over us. They know the faces of city kids, but they don't know any of you guys since you never left the city. Dad's a guard here, so once he tells them who you are, they'll let us through. Looks like bringing Gunter was the right call. I never could have got them to let all those orphans out, said Lutz while watching Gunter tuck to a guard. I blinked in surprise. There are some things you can't do, Lutz? Yeah, of course. There's more I can't do than stuff I can. It always looked like Sister Mine was asking Lutz to do everything, but even he had some things he couldn't do. That was a big relief to me somehow. I guess if I work hard enough, I'll be useful to Sister Mine too someday. You better. I can't keep my eyes on Mine when she's in the temple, so yeah. Lutz grinned. Kai, who had apparently been listening in on our conversation, blinked in surprise and peered at me. You've changed. Not long ago, you were hating hard on how having to serve her. Pretty sure you called her a commoner brat. Yeah, I guess I did. My life in the orphanage had both changed so much that it felt like a lot of time had passed, but in reality it hadn't even been a season since mine joined the temple. I sure was shocked when Arno said that you were going to be the new Blue Shrine Maiden's attendant, man. You're always stuck in the repentance chambers. And I thought I would have been a way better attendant than you. Everyone nodded with Kai. Each and every one of them had wanted to become the new Blue Shrine Maiden's attendant, naturally, since becoming an attendant meant leaving the orphanage. But Arno had shut them all down and stated that the high priest had decided on Gil. At the time, I was super pumped to leave the orphanage and get a higher status than the caretaker priest, always putting me in the repentance room. But my happiness was shattered in an instant. Hey, I remember how you all laughed at me when Arno said the new shrine maiden was a commoner, and that I wouldn't get to leave the orphanage since she wasn't even being given any chambers. Yeah, I remember that. I was all like, what's the point in serving someone who won't even give food or a room? I even said a commoner blue shrine maiden was a perfect fit for you, and then I was glad I didn't get picked. Good times. They laughed at me, saying they were giving her the most useless person in the orphanage since she was a commoner, and that frustration stuck with me when I first met Sister Mine. She was shorter than me, didn't act or talk at all like the other blue shrine maidens, and I just snapped. I couldn't believe she was supposed to be my master. You kept complaining about her not being a normal blue shrine maiden, and now look at you. Yeah, now I'm glad she isn't a normal blue shrine maiden. If I worked hard, she recognizes that and compliments me. It was because Sister Mine was a commoner when being rewarded for work was normal that she patted my head and complimented me just for cleaning her chambers. Thinking about her praising me made me happy. She would pat my head with her little hand while saying, "Thanks, Gil, you worked hard," or something similar. It always made a warmth spread through my chest that made me smile without realizing it. Nobody had patted my head like that after I was baptized and left the orphanage basement. Not only that, but I was apparently a kid who came to the orphanage instead of being born there, so the women in the basement didn't hold me or rub my head much at all compared to the other kids. I'm going to learn lots of things and be useful to Sister Mine just like Les is. But you know, I think I'm a faster learner than you. And Sister Mine's going to be getting more attendance because she has a few right now, right? Said Kai, and the kids around him nodded, but that caught me completely off guard. Yeah, Sister Mine appreciates hard work. We just gotta work hard so she'll appreciate us too, not just Gil. If we work harder than Gil, she might even replace him with us. Not like you're doing much work at all right now, Gil. It was only then that I realized. Sister Mine was a new blue shrine maiden that had just joined the temple, so she only had the attendance given to her by the high priest. She hadn't picked any of her own yet. It was possible that she would start picking a new attendants and replacing old ones soon. That horrible realization made my heart start beating faster. Sister Mine had a heart filled with compassion, enough to care about all the kids in the orphanage. She would never be cruel to her attendants. And since everyone in the orphanage knew that, it wouldn't be odd at all for everyone to start fighting to be her attendant. Crap, there's a ton of people in the orphanage better than me. I felt a cold sweat run down my back. There were plenty of gray priests with experience being attendants, and plenty of gray shrine maidens who could help her with the girl things I never could. Fran used to be the high priest's attendant, so he could do everything. He was already doing most of all the work himself. Delia's a girl, and every blue shrine maiden needed a girl attendant to take care of her. Not to mention that since the high priest ordered Delia to be Sister Mine's attendant, she wouldn't be able to replace her now that she was doing her job seriously. If I didn't learn to do lots of things, I'd be the most useless attendant she had, but how? An indescribable sense of unease spread through my chest. I knew more than anyone else I had been a real brat, and that I was barely capable of helping her at all. We can pass through. Gunter called out and gestured us forward so the clump of orphans started passing through the gate. I followed while holding down my throat. It was prickling so hard it felt like I couldn't breathe. I had skipped lessons for so long that everyone else could do more than me. I didn't know how hard I'd have to work to make up for that. Gil, you look awful. Were you feeling sick or something? Well, I don't know if I'll ever be able to help Mine out, no matter how hard I work. She might switch me out for someone else. I confessed my worries to Lutz, who blinked in surprise. Don't be stupid, he said, shaking his head and going through the gate. I didn't understand. What did he mean by that? Am I being stupid? Hurry! In the fridge! In the doorway, on the top, and not in the where the butter is, but the next one. Leave me alone!
Inside the fridge?
The other fridge! God! Can y'all not just leave me alone? I'm trying to finish this. I'm almost done. The dark tunnel of the wide gate felt symbolic of my mood. The kids were saying, "This reminds me of the basement." Yeah, it's scary, so dark. And their voices echoed surprisingly loud. I walked among them feeling helplessly uneasy. How hard should I work? Is it too late for me to catch up to the others? Yes, they are! After passing through the complete shade of the gates tunnel and reaching the other way, we were outside. It was so bright that just opening my eyes hurt. When the pain faded, I saw scenery unlike anything I had ever seen before spreading out in front of me. I only knew the sky surrounded by walls, so seeing the vast sky expanding endlessly surprised me more than I could say. How much more do I have left? 6 more pages. The kids around me must have felt the same way as they all started shouting in awe. Wow, amazing, look, the sky's so wide, it's not a square. It's very bright, and the sun feels more dazzling than usual. The sky made me think of Sister Mine. This feels as bright as the first time I left that basement. Their comments made me remember that day when Sister Mine cleaned the orphanage and everyone got to eat food with smiles on their faces. That was the day I was really glad that Sister Mine was my master. I felt proud to be her attendant. I don't want to quit being Sister Mine's attendant. I'm going to be useful to her. You really don't get it, do you? Lutz looked at me with his jade eyes filled with surprise and exasperation. Listen, you're the one who brought soup to the kids every day after Mine first lettered about all this, right? You're the one who led the cleaning, right? You're already being useful to Mine. If you're still anxious about it, just try and learn to do more. Mine won't cut you off so easily if you're working hard to improve. You can start by learning how to make paper here. Apparently she would soon be in dire need of attendants to manage the workshop in her place so as it got busier. Lutz, grinning, said I'd probably get more confident if I started managing the workshop that was so important to both Mine and the orphanage. The second he said that, it gave me a clear goal. My worry vanished. Managing the workshop, huh? The Mine workshop's papermaking is definitely going to be vital for buying the orphanage's food, and it'll be Mine's most important source of income. Do a good job, Gil. You're her attendant. Lutz slapped me on the back, and I looked up at the sky. It felt much brighter and bluer than before. Gil, let's hurry. You're getting left behind. Tuli's yell brought me back to reality, and I saw the kids running toward the forest with cheers and smiles filled with the excitement of finally being free. We're going to find stuff for Sister Mine in the forest. Hey, wait, I'm going in first. I'm Sister Mine's attendant. I chased after them, and the kids ran away squealing. You're all getting too excited. Gotta save your energy for the way back, warned Gunther with a grin. Tuli looked up at him and smiled happily. These kids really do love Mine. Okay, I think that's it. I'll see you guys next time.